You've got your song done, you've got your arrangement done, you've finished tracking, you've got your mix and you're very confident with it. Now you're ready to send it off for mastering, or maybe you want to send it off for mixing as well. What exactly do you send them? Well, in this video, we're going to go through that thought process and we're going to make it very easy to digest. So do me a favor, hit the like button, leave a comment below if I forgot anything, and subscribe to the channel for all things UAD and Luna. To support the channel further, go to thestevekinney.com. I have presets available to make tracking easier. You can schedule one-on-one time with me, or you can just buy me a coffee in the description below. It's a great way to make it possible for me to continue to push out videos as fast as possible. Plus, I love coffee. Now, there's an elephant in the room. It's 2022. Everybody has a DAW, but not everybody has the same DAW. That should be obvious, right? Which is probably why you're watching this video. When you find a professional that you want to work with, you should probably first start by asking them what they have in their library. If it's a top studio, they probably already have a very similar plugin collection or sample library, and more than likely can accommodate your project itself. So if you find out that your plugin collection matches their plugin collection, your virtual instruments match their virtual instruments, there should be no real reason that you couldn't just send them the project itself. So that's step one. Ask them what they already have in their library. That's pretty important. Okay, so now let's say that you've found your professional and you want to work with them, but you already know ahead of time that they don't have any of the plugins that you have. Maybe they're a Waves guy and you're a UAD guy. Maybe you're a Pro Tools guy and they're an FL Studio 9 guy. What do you do in that scenario to make everyone's lives easier? Give your engineer a rough mix to kind of reference, and maybe even give them a few tracks that you like to listen to or that were part of the inspiration. Just something in the real world already out there to kind of reference along with your reference mix. And you'll probably also want to detail what about those mixes that you liked. This is going to go a long way to communicating with your engineer what kind of sound and style you were going for in the first place. And then here's the key. What you're going to want to give your mix engineer is only the creative choices and none of the mix decisions. That's the key. So what exactly is a creative decision versus a mixing decision? Well, okay, let's talk about tracking vocals real quick. During tracking on this session, we tracked through our particular microphone. We went into a very particular mic preamp that we wanted because we liked the sound of. But after that, there wasn't a whole lot that was like a creative decision on the track. So everything that you see here, right? Like Melodyne, API Vision Console, the suppressor de-esser, 1176, Pro Q3, all of that was a mix decision, okay? So if I needed to send this project off and I wanted it to be mixed, I'd want to make sure that I took everything off. Now that said, I might leave Melodyne on. That would save the engineer a bit of work and a bit of time, but that's a good differentiator between what were mixed decisions while I was mixing versus what I'd want to send off. On the bass, I had this API Vision Console and this Neve. Now, in this scenario, this was the sound that I was going for. So in this scenario, those would have been kept on. It's very similar to tracking guitar, right? Of course, you always want to take a DI on the way in, as well as whatever you're miking, if you're miking a guitar amp or if you're taking an amp simulator. But the point is with guitars, right, is that a lot of times the sound coming out of the amp is the sound that you want in the mix. So you're committing to that sound, that's the sound, that's what you're gonna send off later, in addition to a DI. Additionally, with the vocals, we have these buses here that are effects. Now, even in this project, I've actually already done it, but in this project, these show up as WAV files. So I'd actually already prepped this. This is an example of what it would have looked like if I send it off to a mixing engineer. These are the creative delays and reverbs that I wanted in the song. It's also really helpful to do it that way because then if there was a situation where the engineer didn't have your particular plugin, this is what's gonna allow them to be able to get that creative sound if you need to send them the session. And from there, they can blend it how they need to, or they could just completely recreate it because they now have something very specific to reference. I've also named them what they were, so you know, the Lexicon 224 room effects, if they listen to that, obviously they'd be able to dial up something pretty similar. Let's just say I overcompressed, maybe I messed up and I overcompressed these vocals. Being able to send them the vocal without all of that compression and EQ and the mix decisions that I made allows the professional the freedom to manipulate the audio the way they need without being locked in a box. So again, just a simple recap and clarification. You yourself know what you chose to be part of the sound. That's gonna be what you're gonna wanna bounce out and give to your engineer, but all of your mix related decisions as you were kind of building your mix or building your song and you're like, the vocal's not sitting right with the drums, and you put on a compressor with it, you probably wanna take that off if that was kind of more of a mix decision. A better way to think of mix decisions is mix decisions are typically the decisions that you make when you take your creative decisions and you need to blend them with one another because they're not really blending very well. Or maybe they're blending okay, but you just need to kind of carve out some space, or you know, maybe compress the vocal up a bit so that it sits with the rest of the track better, right? It's a technical decision, not a creative decision. So if it helps you to think of it inversely from a creative decision, go for it. Your goal is to send the tracks, the creative tracks, to your mix engineer and let him technically make it a masterpiece. But with your creative sound, that's kind of the goal. And again, it's super helpful to not lock your engineer into a box. So overcompressing, notch filtering EQs, stuff like that, I mean, you could really kind of mess things up pretty quickly. So while it's helpful to send them like a reference mix and then some like examples of what you want it to sound like, it's also really smart to share with them the creative sound only. Now, what about mastering? Well, let's just go out and assume that I want to send this off for mastering, and maybe I send the mastering engineer a rough and he's like, hey, send me some stems here. What your mastering engineer's goal is that, again, your mastering engineer might not want to be locked into a box, and they might think, okay, if I start compressing and pulling some volume out on the master bus or the 2-bus print of whatever you have, maybe now the bass kind of gets overwhelming, so maybe I want to be able to manipulate that, or maybe the kick drum becomes a little too much. If the mastering engineer asks for these stems, it's only going to help your track, right? Because then they're going to be able to compensate for whatever they might be hearing. Additionally, on my main, right, I have a limiter here. So if I send my mastering engineer something with my compression and limiting already on, there's no more headroom for them to take it and manipulate it. So it's going to be overcompressed. So assuming that you have an awesome mix, it'd be pretty simple. You just give them a 2-bus print, right? If the mix is perfect, you're professional at it, it's great. You just take everything off the master bus, give them a 2-bus print, and then theoretically that'd work. But we don't live in the perfect world, so in that case, right, we would turn off everything here on this master bus, and now what we would do is want to be soloing out our buses and just exporting them, again, so long as they only have creative decisions. So I believe the 1081 here was a creative decision, but the API 2500 was a mix-related decision, so I'd turn that off, disable it. Same thing here with the Pro Q3 on the acoustic bus, right? I'd turn that off, but I'd leave my creative tone on that bus. Again here with the e-guitars, Pro Q3 is probably something going on here. Oh, yep. Technical decision, turn that off. LA2A, I don't want to lock them into a box, so maybe turn that off. But the 1081, that's probably more of like a tone thing. I'm gonna want to leave my tones on. The key here, again, is not locking the engineer into a box, leaving your tonal creative choices on, and allowing them the freedom to make the technical mix-related or mastering-related compression and EQ flavor changes, right? One other really key thing to consider is headroom. You know, with these taped simulators, a lot of times you run into the front side of those plugins hotter than you might normally would. So what you'd want to do is just play through the song, let your bus play out, and if you see any clipping, highlight everything relative to that and pull everything down equally so that the mix is still the same. You've just now given yourself a little bit more headroom so that it's not digitally clipping at export. Now let's say you go through and you export all your buses, but there's still a few tracks that are outside of those buses. Well, just think of each track as its own bus and do the same thing you would for a bus, but for that track, you might have, you know, a bunch of random tracks there that you're also sending them, but at least you are giving the clearest picture to the engineer of what your mix was running into the master bus at unity gain. So when he or she drops all of those WAV files into their DAW or their editor, your entire mix before the master bus is recreated, and then from there they can start to master your track. Hopefully you guys now understand what exactly a creative decision is versus a mix decision, and hopefully this video has helped you in some way to kind of understand what you're going to want to do when you're ready to send your mix or your song off to mastering or mixing engineers. And it might even also help you in your endeavor to create music, because now you'll be thinking about things more of like, okay, this is a creative decision, and okay, look, this is a mixed decision, and I know that I'm going to send this off later. That might help clear up and streamline your process when you are creating. If you guys made it this far into the video, what are you waiting for? Hit the like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel for all things UAD to support the channel further, which really helps me make videos like this at a higher frequency. You can go to thestevekinney.com. I have UAD presets that make tracking easier. You can schedule one-on-one time if you want to have very specific questions answered, or if you want to work with me, that's how you get in touch with me, through that website. I greatly appreciate all the support, and thanks so much for watching, guys. Cheers, we'll see you on the next video.